Hello everyone. I'm sure all of you are overloaded with a lot of information from a lot of speakers here and great speakers and a lot of suppliers here as well. But I'm sure a lot of things are running in your mind, like how do you organize all this information? How do you prioritize this information? What do you focus on so that you can realize the vision of your company? And because when you have so much information from different people, different organizations, it's always good to look at the outcomes and not just focus on the technology progression. So I'm here to basically present a model which we created to help in the journey. So before I get started, I'm Raj Paul from Lochbridge, a connected car focused company right here in Detroit. We have been in business here for more than 40 years. So just to highlight the fact about the amount of information which you have been overloaded today. So this is an infographic which we released part of telematics update. This is no means a comprehensive list of all the companies in our ecosystem because we couldn't, There's no way we can fit in all the companies in this one infographic. But if you look at the number of players, in every way possible, this doesn't, by the way, represent autonomous. If you add that spectrum, there's a lot more companies. So it's very important to focus on the outcomes and not just look at the technology progression, which is what we're going to talk today. So the 4 key outcomes which we think are important are loyalty, differentiation, monetization, and the last one, not the least, quality. Right? From a loyalty standpoint, every OEM wants to create a sticky relationship with its customer. So it's pretty important that how can you create a loyal customer so that the relationship stays for long, so the household starts buying the same product from the same OEM. The next one is differentiation. There are so much technology played in today's space. So what each OEM does obviously is got to differentiate so that from a competitive standpoint, they have an edge over the competition. So that is an important outcome which we want to focus on as well. The next one, what I call the holy grail, monetization. How do you make money when you're spending so much money on the connectivity? The last but not the least is quality. How can I build a better product? How can I get insights into my product and build a better product? So before I start getting into the model which we created, I want to start off just to set the stage on where, as an industry, we stand. I'm going to basically not use any OEM in specific order, but in general, I'm going to talk about the industry at large. So to start with, if you look at our industry, the connected car industry, OnStar defined the space in late 90s, 97, 96 timeframe. It was a pure telematics play. In fact, I think, based on my knowledge, it was set up more as a TSP, and OnStar did business for other OEMs as well. If you fast forward a little bit, early 2000s, Wingcast was created by Ford and Qualcomm and Oracle, which was also set more like a TSP because they did more than Ford and other OEMs. And then ATX Technologies, I'm not sure how many of you heard these names, which is the precursor of what we hear as SXM is basically ATX Technologies, again set up as a TSP. So the whole model was around how can I commercialize the connectivity which I'm creating. It wasn't all cars were connected, only select few more the luxury brands. So now if you fast forward today, pretty much every OEM has a connected car play, right? Either using a TSP or on their own, or they're building on their own. So the industry has progressed so far where the cost of connectivity is no more being debated, but it's taken for granted that OEMs are going to provide connectivity. So now moving on to the 4 outcomes. Let's talk about loyalty, which I think is a pretty important one, of how can I create a loyal customer. The industry has progressed quite a bit in this regard. So I'm going to use some personal examples just to highlight the importance of loyalty. Me and my marketing director were talking today, so we thought let's redefine the meaning of TCO. It's not total cost of ownership, but how about total convenience of ownership? So if I have a very good ownership experience, I'm going to be a loyal customer. So what are the OEMs doing in that regard? I think we have come a long way in that regard. In my household, we use 2 luxury products, one domestic and one imported. So from my experience standpoint, both are connected. Both give me the convenience of a mobile phone. Both give me service reminders. So the convenience of owning it has progressed quite a bit. And I think that is very important, because service reminders are pretty important. I don't have to look at my sticker to figure out when, right? So is it ubiquitous across the board? Probably not, but we're getting there. Is there room to grow? Definitely, right? I mean, if I have a problem with my car, if my car tells me there's a problem, even before I get to know the problem, that is a good experience. And I think there is room to grow in that space. So now moving on to the next attribute, which is differentiation. So this is a pretty interesting thing. I'm sure all of us are addicted to this, right? So how can I extend my digital experience into the car? That, I think, is going to play a pretty big differentiation factor. I mean, there are so many other things. I'm just going to pick a few things here. The digital experience, I think the industry has evolved. I mean, I'm sure all of you would have read about Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The OEMs are pretty open, embracing these technologies in addition to their own technology. And I think that is going to create a differentiating factor. So we have progressed quite a bit in that space as well. But then is there room there? Definitely, right? I mean, how personalized our user experience in the car? So that's debatable. How contextual it is. I think a lot of work is being done in that space, but I think there is a lot more room from a differentiation standpoint. I'll move on to the next one, which is, as I said, the holy grail, monetization. How can I make money out of this connection? Now I'm making it standard. Every OEM is going to have a connectivity in the car. I've heard discussions, I've been in the space for a very long time. The cost of the TCU and the cost of the connectivity, the subscription model is one way to recoup that cost. But I think there is a lot of enough thought process to look otherwise. So money can be made from this connection in a number of ways. I mean, one example I'm just going to talk about is usage-based insurance, right? I'm sure all of you know about Progressive Snapshot product. And the Snapshot product essentially does usage-based insurance. But now also, I'm not sure how many of you observe this closely, Progressive has a tie-up with OnStar as well, where the connectivity comes into play to essentially do usage-based insurance as well. There is wealth of data which the OEMs are going after from a monetization standpoint. I mean, I can hear privacy, but then I'm a strong believer if Google has figured out, I'm sure the auto industry can figure out as well. There's so much of value in data which is collected, which I think can create an ecosystem where, whether it's healthcare or insurance providers, doesn't matter, they could participate in this ecosystem, and there could be a nice, beautiful monetization model coming out of it. I'll move to the last one, which I think is a pretty important one, quality. Right? The insights we can gather from the product can cut down our operating costs, can predict. So I think about a year back, I think Chevy announced that they're going to do predictive alerts. So if I can predict what is going to fail, I think I can save a lot of money by avoiding recalls. But if I can even take it further, if I start looking at patterns of what's happening there, about from a breakage standpoint, there is the technology exists today from a big data standpoint or machine learning standpoint. From a quality standpoint, there's a lot of work which can be done to cut down that. Again, I'm going to cite an example. So one of my cars had a problem, and of course, I'm experiencing the problem, and the car is not telling me I have a problem. So I take it to the dealership, and the dealership looks at it and tells me, this cannot be fixed now, you've got to bring it in. Oh, by the way, we don't have a loaner. The earliest loaner is Monday. Safe for you to drive, but come back Monday morning. This whole user experience can be done in a lot different way. If my car knew there's a problem, notifies my dealership calls me in, and then basically schedules an appointment. So while building a quality product, I think getting insights into this data, I think is going to be very important from an industry standpoint. So just to present our model. So we just picked key attributes to define the model for each one of these outcomes. I'm not going to get into detail on all of them, but we're going to take one for the discussion's sake, which is monetization. So the whole dealer, OEM, owner interaction and the relationship, there is a lot of room there from a monetization standpoint. What I mean by that is, can the connectivity come into play where you could drive traffic to the dealership to basically create more a service opportunity? So those kind of use cases are still being explored. Among the two products I have, I'm just talking about, my personal experience, just to cite a few. One of them sends me a reminder that is a service reminder, and another one actually calls the back end, and then there is a dealership which gets to know about my car is due for service, and I actually get a call to tell, we see that your car is due for service, do you want us to schedule? So the whole dealer getting involved in my day-to-day life from a experience standpoint, I think that is a monetization opportunity because now I'm going to the dealership and I can take care of things. Right? Moving on to the next one, which is how do you exploit the data you have? How can you make it easy for third parties, whether it's fleet management or healthcare, doesn't matter, any industry to participate. I think once we start focusing on that, that creates a lot of a monetization opportunity as well. The next one, is just basically one use case, fleet management. There are a lot of custom solutions out there. I think from an industry standpoint, when I have a connectivity, when I know about my product, why not basically support solutions like fleet management? Third-party services, because now I can give access to my overall, by creating this ecosystem, there are a lot of players who can participate, and I think there are revenue opportunities there as well. Last is the ride-sharing and car share, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. I'm just going to hone in on one use case, UBI. Usage-based insurance, in my perspective, is more it's an infancy, because we are looking at attributes which define the car, whether it's hard braking or how many miles you're driving or whatnot. But the whole aspect of the driver itself is not basically thought about, because I could be driving my wife's car a certain way, but now I'm moving on to another car. How cool will it be to have like a roaming profile, whether I'm renting a car, doesn't matter what I'm driving. I could essentially score and do a risk assessment if I'm able to access all this information, which means I need to look at my identity traveling with me regardless of what product I drive. And I think that becomes very important so that, I can build nice use cases. So if you look at the slide, we just listed all possible attributes which can come into play. One of them is contextual. It's not about how I drive. If I'm driving 30 miles at a 20-mile zone, because it happens to be a school zone, of course I'm not driving slow. Now if I start looking at weather, if I did hard braking, was it because the weather condition was bad? So we have done some work in this where the context in which the driver is operating under is taken into giving a score to the driver. In certain cases, we could even give instant feedback to the driver, so the driver could change course. And this information is valuable because this information actually can be sold by OEMs to insurance providers. Because I think this one, we're just touching the tip. I think this could go into different ways from a use case standpoint. I think there is a lot of value in this data. So now I'm going to get into my model. We're just going to take monetization. So the way we looked at this is basically a map of all the possible attributes, and we looked at the industry at large. So we rated each attribute as, you can think of it as basic and advanced, and that if you have something in between, we graded that as 2, right? So it's more weighted average where we scored each attribute. So we're going to talk about 2 attributes. One is from a maintenance standpoint, I talked about being proactive, right? How can I communicate that, the vehicle is due for service or there's a problem with the car, right? But then if I'm going to essentially do prognostics where I'm alerting the driver even before the problem is noticed by the driver, that is the next level of maturity. Last but not the least, if I can tie that to the dealership and the dealership now knows I have a problem and now a meeting is scheduled by peeking into my calendar and looking at my first available appointment, I think that is pretty advanced, which I don't think anybody's looking at, right? So these are different levels of maturity which we can grade from a solution standpoint. Level 3 is needed, but I think the technology exists today and it's easy to do that as well. Now, if you go to the next set of stuff I'm talking about, which is APIs, right? So I can either expose APIs for just basic stuff. Some of the OEMs are looking at it, wherein it could be just to get information so that I can use that information, like, for example, Progressive is a good example. But then it could be even beyond that, where solutions can be built, where connectivity is taken for granted, which is where the OEMs make money. So that you can build fleet management is one solution, but there are other solutions which can come out if APIs can be exposed. The challenge in this space is how many enterprises are capable of exposing APIs in a way which can be consumed by applications in a very simple way. Our company focuses on connected car and IoT at large, but when we see some of the enterprises, biggest challenge is exposing their existing assets in simple to use API is a challenge, which I don't think it is an auto challenge or a connected car challenge. A good example is I could take my car to the dealership and tell there's a problem, and probably the dealer system opens a ticket, and let's take there is some interaction happening with the OEM. If my business processes are done in such a way that they're modular and can be exposed as APIs, All I'm doing is now getting a sixth sense from connectivity so that I can use existing business processes and I'm automating this whole experience. Are enterprises at that level? I don't think so. Right? I mean, one thing is, I mean, even from a data standpoint, I mean, I say data islands, data scattered all around the place. How do you bring data together to even to make sense out of it? So there's quite a bit of work to be done in this space. But then some of this transformation from an enterprise standpoint, I think will create monetization opportunity. I'm not going to touch on everything because lack of time. So what we did was, we graded each and every attribute from an industry standpoint. This is basically some OEMs are pretty advanced and some are not. And based on that, we think monetization, if you look at it, fleet management solutions, I think there's quite a work. That's why this is graded higher. But then if you look at dealer program integration and so on, it's rated low. So we think from an industry standpoint on a scale of 1 to 5, I think our industry from a pure monetization standpoint is 2. Because, I mean, I'm sure you'll see a lot of talk about ROI, I mean, whether it's an IoT or connected car, right? How do I basically recoup my cost? Because now I'm incurring connectivity cost, I'm incurring the hardware cost as well, and I've got to recoup the cost. It's not just about the customer experience, which I'm going to enhance, but there is a lot of alternate revenue opportunities, and I think at an industry standpoint, this is pretty low. So we looked at all the 5 attributes, and we graded our industry. I mean, it was a weighted average. From an overall industry standpoint, we think, I mean, our perspective is our industry is probably on a scale, I mean, it's probably around 9.5. And if you look at the variations on the scores of each and every attribute, loyalty and differentiation, because there's a lot of enhancements, as I highlighted about how the digital experience is getting extended to the car. Though the whole aspect of the IHU become the 4th screen, there's quite a bit of work to be done. In relative terms, we think loyalty and differentiation scores much higher than the remaining 2 attributes. Just closing slides. I mean, I'll give some time for questions. So we are a Detroit-based company focused on connected car. We'll be in business for a very long time, more auto-centric being in Detroit. Our focus from a company standpoint is, how can I get a better user experience from a digital engagement standpoint? How can I get insight, or the sixth sense, as I call it, using the wealth of data which we could get, and then it's an analytics space. That is one of our focus areas as well. And last but not the least, how can we create connections, whether it's a smart product, whether it's a refrigerator, or whether it's a car, how can we basically create connectivity? That is one of our expertise as well. Thank you. You can take any questions.
Thanks again, Raj. So we do have a question from our audience. So the question is, what do you think that full OTA updates are they still a long ways off?
From an industry standpoint, OTA updates, I think we are probably again at its infancy. I think there's enough, struggling to find the right word. I mean, we talk about Tesla quite a bit. Tesla started from scratch. Pretty much all the ECUs are upgradable. But if you look at the non-Tesla world, which has been there for a long time, I don't think we are at a point from an OTA standpoint we can update all the ECUs. The capability exists more around the TCU itself, and which itself is just starting. I don't think it is prevalent with most of the OEMs. I think that will see first, and then probably the app updates from an OTA standpoint will probably follow. I mean, our prediction is, I think ECU updates are way out there at least another 5 years. Because it's going to drastically change the way we make the product, so I think that will be the last one. Any other questions?
Unless we've got any other questions from the front half of the room, I don't think I can make it to the back half. If not, just another round of applause for Rajan, please.
Thank you.